Okay, so clutch is on its way, slave is on its way. Until that happens, there's a lot of things that I wanted to do, not necessarily needed to do, but wanted to do that I'd like to accomplish. The first of all is cleaning the hell out of my shop. That's not happening until the Taco Prezzo moves because I hate cleaning around things and I want everything to be empty. So what are we going to do? We are going to work on some of the knickknack auxiliary stuff that I think is going to make the Ranger, Willie, a little bit cool. Give it our own personal flair, right? We can't really address any drivability stuff because we can't drive it. And we think that we fixed a lot of the issues that we had, right? We got a new air filter, a whole new tune-up on it. It's still running a little bit rough, but I just can't tell if that's because of the disaster that was in the bell housing, interfering with the whole clutch assembly, or if it's because it's got 2.5-year-old gas in the tank. The brakes feel good in the driveway. They're definitely biting now. The pedal's a little bit soft. That whooshing noise in the air that I'm feeling, I did a little bit of research on that, and that also might be normal. Again, not going to know if the brakes are actually good to go until we get the thing on the road. So I have a bunch of accessory stuff that I wanted to do. Then I figure now is probably the perfect time to do it, right? We're absolutely missing a front bumper. We are missing a rear fascia. We'll call it a fascia. We need to dovetail the back of the bed behind the rear wheels to kind of give us that look that we were going for. We need to do a filler neck. Filler neck, I'm not going to tackle right now. It's dark out. Not that you can see from where you are, but it's dark out, and the truck has the nose nosed in because there's no other space in the shop. So front bumper, right? Makes sense. Something that we absolutely have to check off. God forbid I get pulled over by DOT or by a state trooper or something that really want to bust chops. In Connecticut, they can and they will send me for an inspection if I don't have a front bumper. So it's one of those legalities here that, in our communist state. So I have my comically large green pen, so I can't, it's easy to see, know where it is, and a sheet of paper, diagnostics from the Jeep MDS scenario that we did a while ago. And I got to thinking about this bumper and what I want it to look like, right? So we're going for pre-runner homage, we'll call it. So we know that we need to have free space, freedom, free real estate, if you will, in front of each of the front wheels. We don't want to interfere. We really want to keep it high and tight above the front wheels. We want to protect the drivetrain, so we're going to have some sort of skid plate up to the front, if you will, probably with a V shape for some stability. I thought about bending versus angular when it comes to this bumper. We're definitely gonna do a tube stock, right? Because it's the Ranger, the '94 Ranger has some very rounded body lines in it. The whole thing is round. It was a theme of the era, right? We went from very boxy '80s cars to very soft, round cars in the '90s, and we need to find that happy medium between looks aesthetically appropriate and doesn't look horrible, right? So if I did square stock or flat sheet steel bumper, it's not gonna go well in the car, right? It just doesn't match the lines of the car or anything like that. So we're gonna use tube, but I think that we're gonna do some angular cuts instead of doing some soft mandrel bends. I think if we did mandrel bends, I just think it'd be too soft. I think it would be just too much like a Pep Boys special. So we want to kind of design something simple, right? I wanted to have a little bit of functionality. So I'm using some decently thick walled stuff. I'm going to use the bumper brackets that came with the lift kit to mount this bumper to the frame. I see a lot of people that just weld these bumpers straight to the frames. They actually cut off the crush section of the frame. Why can't I think of the term right now? Crumple zone. They actually cut off the crumple zone portion of the frame, plate it, and put a bumper on it. I don't know why. I'm sure there's some off-road reason for that, but it seems to me like you would want your crumple zones and your bumper attached to the crumple zones. So anyway, so we're going to use the factory mounting location. we're going to tube off of those plates, and I'm thinking that we're going to do something like this, right? So let's pretend that this is the truck. Here's our nice round spot, our round headlights, and our round grill. It's saying, oh my God, why won't you finish me? Let's give it some eyeballs. Why not? So if we just make it straight across, it's going to look horrible, right? We have to kind of match the body contours a little bit. So this is the tube. We've got frame rail stub down here. I'm not an artiste. Could do better, but not going to. I think that we are going to kick out slightly up to here. So figure out those angles when we get there. Maybe a cross brace down here so we have something to mount the bottom of the skid plate to. And then I talked about wanting function, right? So I have some leftover very bright lights, some LED driving lights. They're not quite a pencil beam, they're not quite a flood. I forget what dispersion pattern they are, but I've used them on projects in the past, and I happen to have two kicking around that are brand new that haven't been used. So we're gonna mount those guys, in the middle here. And then we're probably gonna put two cuts in here. 1 and 2. And we'll determine the lengths of these down tubes and the center section once we have the main bar cut. So I'm probably going to go middle of headlight to middle of headlight and then start following the... So here's our rough idea, right? These are the two frame rails. This is what I was just describing. So probably going to go, I think, middle of headlight to middle of headlight for the main bar. Actually, we'll go to the end of headlights. We'll go end of headlight to end of headlight, and then we'll do a little bit of an angle cut around the corners here, just to protect the marker lights and everything like that, right? So the whole point of a bumper is that it's the first thing that hits in the event that you actually hit something. So tucking it under here does nothing for us. We want it to kind of sit out a little bit, right? I think, you could see now that I said everything was very round, right? We've got round, all of this is round, this whole leading edge is rounded. The only straight line that we really have, angular line, is right here. I think it makes sense to take this sharp line and pair it with another sharp line. Looking down at the Ranger, you can actually see that this has a slight bow to it, right? So I think that by keeping this pipe straight, I don't want to angle this pipe. I don't want to put any cuts in this pipe. And I could bend it, I guess, but the second that you introduce bends into a pipe, you're introducing points of potential failure. So I think we run it right in the front, just a little bit of space, and then a cut, just to kind of wrap it back around a little bit. And then these are the crumple zones. This is where the factory bumper mounted. So I'm going to use these beefy, I think these are 3/8, maybe those might be 3/16, bumper support brackets to, those things are beefy. To mount the down tubes too. And then we might tie those tubes in down here somewhere. We definitely want some form of skid plate, right? We don't want stuff to just be able to throw into the radiator and all of that. So the trick here is doing this without compromising airflow, especially because this thing has, a 27-year-old cooling system, and we don't want to introduce any more adversity for it to overcome than it has. You know what, looking at it now, I understand why people plate or weld to the crumple zones, because if I come off of here, yep, nope, now I get it. Now I get it, because it looks a lot better if you just go straight off the face than if you go from the insides. Decisions. If it's ugly, but it functions well, that's what I go for. I'm not, I mean, if you can't tell, I don't really care about how this thing looks as long as it performs well. It performs to my expectations. Let's just eliminate that word well right out of there. Yeah, I think that's what we're gonna do. Alright, that was a lot of time lapse. And I think we are 95% done. Yeah, I'd say we're 95% done. Really, the only thing that we're missing at this point is skid plate. And that's because I don't have a piece of steel or aluminum that's thick enough to work as a skid plate. That's the right size that I need. So we're gonna have to make a trip to the steel yard in the future. But I needed to actually, make the bumper before I figured out what size skid plate I needed. And I'm actually pretty happy with how it came out. I don't know that it's 100% finished yet. Unsure a little bit about the whatever. I'm gonna show it to you. Ta-da! In all of its ridiculous glory. So, like I said, I'm not sure if I'm done with it, right? I made a couple design decisions along the way. I added a bend into the middle of the bumper to get it to curve basically to the front end of the car a little bit. I'm torn. I'm really torn about the end caps. The battery had died at one point, and I had mocked up, kind of following this guy around, and it ended up looking like a goofy handlebar mustache. I think what I'm ultimately going to do is wait until I add a skid plate. So I'm going to add a small skid plate, right? I didn't go wild with it. I didn't drop anything down low. But really my concern was this area here, right? This is where the traditional bumper, the OEM bumper actually protects, and up and above. So, I haven't decided if I'm gonna, not cert it yet, or if I'm going to, actually just, grind and weld some tabs on. The paint that I used, it's like an epoxy based chassis and frame paint basically. So, it's really easy to just grind off and respray, and it blends in really evenly. It's still a teeny bit tacky. It's been about an hour since I sprayed it. So I'll walk you through what I did. Basically, I used some tube that I had kicking around. It's 2 1/4 inch by 1/8 wall. It's actually zinc galvanized tube that I used for a structural project elsewhere. But it's extremely strong stuff. I did end up welding it directly to the front crumple zones of the frame. I couldn't find a solution that I liked with the bolt-on brackets. Didn't look wide enough with the brackets bolt on the inside of the 2 frame horns. It looked too narrow. I didn't like the extreme angle that I would have to get coming out to kind of, get it to sit where I wanted it to sit. So I ended up going with this. For the light mounts, I have a bunch of this stuff. My local steel yard always has a bunch of this stuff. I'm pretty sure it's Wireway, some sort of conduit. Also definitely looks like the stuff that they make street signs out of. It's mild steel, it's formed. It is perfect for light mounts. I literally just cut in between, and then you've got a nice rounded edge in here to weld to bars, flat stock, whatever you need. There's area to run wiring through the underneath. So that stuff, awesome. I cut 2 little pieces for these lights. I know they don't look like much, but they are ridiculously bright. I think they're like 120 watt equivalents in LEDs, and they're not just mini light bars. They are some Swedish brand that I can't remember the name of right now. So a lot of the eBay and Amazon crap that looks like this is, it's like 40 or 50 watts, and it just kind of blows light all over the place. These are a nice, actually angled beam. And the really cool part is that they only draw 12 watts, I want to say, or 14. I'll have to look at the box, which is down in the house. But what that means is I can tie these 2 into the high beam circuit without having to run an additional relay. That's the beauty of LEDs, is that they draw so little that I'm still within specification on that relay circuit by tying these 2 in. So I did leave space at the top of both upright stanchions on either side. I ground out a little bit of an extra nook to run the wires in and down the frame horn so I can hide them completely. They're not going to be just zip tied and hanging around. I just haven't done that because I have to add extensions to actually get them to go all the way through. I also haven't aimed them. As far as the rest goes, I ended up just cutting a piece and leveling it out. And I know it doesn't look level right now. It looks a little wacky because, well, the car I just had this side of the car jacked up before as I was pulling the transmission. And when it settled, it didn't settle level. So I leveled it to itself and to the frame of the car itself. That's pretty much it. Let me know what you think. I think it's ugly. I think it matches the aesthetic of Willy, which is ugly. But I also think that it kind of captures some of that 90s pre-runner essence that I was going for. I don't know, I kind of like it. It kind of looks halfway finished, kind of looks fully finished, which is probably how Willy will exist in most of its life. Halfway finished and fully finished at the same time. Okay, so jumping forward a couple of days, I did unfortunately leave the camera inside over the weekend and was out here for quite a few hours. We had absolutely horrific weather. I mean, multiple inches of rain over the course of 2 days. It was humid, it was cold, it was disgusting. Taco was over, we were working on the taco presso a little bit. And while he was doing that, we were running the mill and making some mounts and brackets for that thing. I spent some time working on the bumper. Parts arrived, so I got the new slave cylinder in, new clutch assembly for the Ranger. There's a substantial amount of difference, which I'll walk you through in a second. But as far as updates go, let's go through the bumper first, and then into the transmission as chipmunks watch. Mr. Charge them in mission. So for the bumper, remember when I said that I want this thing thematically to hit the 90s, right? So I wanted something goofy, something mildly obscene, and I think I got that. So I added some ridiculous, 45 offcuts that sit pretty well with the body line incorporation. Is it perfect? No. Is it ugly? Absolutely. Do I love it? Yeah, kind of do. Not sorry. We added some D-rings off the bumper as well, just for, whatever, because why not? Every good bumper needs some D-rings, needs some tow hook locations. Probably should have tied them in lower, but they work fine up there. I don't know. We added a skid plate as well. So on the backside in here, I ended up cross bracing in the frame with the same tube that I used for the bumper itself, and then I added a fairly large skid plate with a nice bend underneath, and tied this back end of the skid plate into there's like a diff cover from the factory. I guess I should probably aim it down there, right? So there's like a diff cover from the factory that's attached to the frame, so the back of this skid plate is tied into that diff cover. We've got our lights wired up. They look obnoxiously bright, which is kind of what I was hoping for, because if you can't tell, these yellowed reflective headlights suck. I mean, they're horrible. So we've got a lot of not well-lit roads around here, and any additional lighting helps. So we're going to be adding some extra lighting as well. But these two lights, these driving lights, I ended up tying directly to the headlight circuit, so that every time you tie on the high beam circuit, I should say, so every time you turn on the high beams, these lights will illuminate alongside the high beams. They're 5300K temperature. They are a 60-degree beam. These are the 60s? These are the 40s, I think. These are a 40 or 45-degree beam. The 60s I have that I'm going to put on the roof rack when we get there. And I'm not going to tie those into the headlights. But these are, I specifically tied them into the high beams so that I don't have to worry about flipping multiple switches. And the draw of LEDs puts us well below the current threshold for that particular circuit. So I don't have to add additional relays or anything like that. That's the beauty of LEDs, is that they draw such a small amount of power relative to their incandescent counterparts that we can afford to do stuff like this. So tied those in. I added some connectors here. So we've actually got these things connectorized in here. Not the best wiring job I've ever done, but again, the whole point of this is to be cheap. Everything is soldered and not shrink wrapped, it's electrical taped. I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that one. I know people are gonna cringe at that, but heat shrink was down in the house and it was really, really raining. If I showed you how much it was raining, you wouldn't blame me. So we're just gonna go with that. On the topic of the rest of stuff, so there's the shock clutch, right? We went over that. Really blued, still smells. It smells like dead animal and burnt clutch, even from 4 feet away. Oh. Kind of the nice part about this thing being as lifted as it is now is that you can get around pretty easily underneath here. This thing's not jacked up at all, and I have, I don't know,
4 fingers between my chest and the frame rail on top of my big orange squishy safety mat. So we have the clutch assembly bolted up. It is a $63 clutch from ClutchMax, which I've used these clutches in the past on other beater projects, we'll call them, and they hold up fine. I mean, they're, you know, it's not an XCD Daikin. It's nothing fancy. It's just a cheap clutch, but I mean, for what this thing's gonna see, it's gonna be perfectly fine. All in for a clutch and a slave cylinder, we were 98 bucks, I think. So we were $63 for the, no, we were $90. $90 even. We were 63 bucks for the clutch, and we were $26.50 for the slave cylinder. So big spending. I now understand why people keep their piece of shit 94 Ford Rangers on the road for as long as they do, because everything is, I'm not even kidding, like $27. It is so cheap to do everything to this truck, which is kind of amazing. So order of operations, what we have left to do under here, oh, not hit my head on the gas tank. We discovered that the flanges for the exhaust are gone. I mean, there's supposed to be a bolt there holding that whole thing together. Cat flange is still in good shape, and as I get older, I appreciate the smell of catless exhaust less and less. And maybe that's a hey you kids get off my lawn moment, but just not a huge fan of the fumes and the headaches that come with it. So we might leave the cats on here, but that flange is definitely gonna go. You can see it's already been patched and repaired before. That muffler is ridiculous and needs to be replaced. So, sounds to me like we should put an exhaust on it. We're gonna get the transmission back in here and mount it up, and throw the drive shaft back in and get this thing mobile again. You know, simple transmission to pull, simple transmission to put back in. So we'll get that going, and then we will have like 3 things left on the list until Willie gets a plate slapped on it, and I don't know what his first job is gonna be. I got a lot of piles of brush around my yard that I don't feel like putting in the bucket of the tractor. So maybe we'll caravan or gallivant? Yeah, maybe we'll gallivant around the property and pick up some of those piles of brush and use it for what it was probably intended to be used for, not what I did to it. All right, we are back, filthy. I mean, covered in crap. I'm sure my back is gross because I've been laying on the floor because, you know, shop's occupado. The more and more that I work with internal slave cylinders, the less and less I like them. And by internal slave cylinders, I mean slave cylinders that are internal to the transmission, for a couple of reasons. One, if the slave cylinder ever fails, it pisses the hydraulic fluid, in this case DOT3 brake fluid, all over the internal components. So that's the clutch, that's the pressure plate, that's everything. And the second that stuff gets on the clutch, it just destroys the clutch, right? So external slave of the fork, a little bit safer from a liability standpoint. When things go wrong, they don't go drastically wrong. So the other thing that I found is that putting the transmission onto the engine, so when you, I showed you earlier that the pressure plate and the clutch disc itself bolt up to the flywheel on the engine, right? And when you seat the transmission onto that assembly with that internal slave and throwout bearing on there, that slave and throwout bearing serve as a spring, right? There's pressure preloaded in there. There's a spring in that slave cylinder, along with whatever ships from the factory. I didn't bench bleed it or anything. So in doing so, not only are you fighting to get the transmission lined up, right? So you have to get the splines of the input shaft slotted into the pressure, into the clutch disc itself. I can show that here with clutch alignment tool, right? So pretend that this is the transmission input shaft. Here is the clutch disc. So when you're finagling the transmission, right, you need to get this in. The end of this actually goes into the input shaft bearing in the flywheel, pilot bearing, if you will. And then the splines of the input shaft slot into the clutch, right?
So there's multiple pieces of alignment that are absolutely critical to that. That's why you use an alignment tool to get everything squared away. This thing kind of sucked. I hate that internal slate. It just made everything way more complicated than it needed to be. Good news is we have it in, we have it bled. It feels like there's pressure. I haven't started it yet. I wanted to do that on camera in case I made a mistake. Then I can own up to it and work through it with you guys. So at this point, I have 4-corner bled the brakes. I have bled the clutch 3 times. And by 3 times, I mean emptied the tiny reservoir here, filled it back up, bled it again, checked for pressure. Pedal feels pretty good, just sitting in it. Feels way better than it used to. So hopefully that took care of it. The brake pedal also feels better. I mean, it doesn't feel great, but again, I think I mentioned this already. I can't tell what is a good brake pedal versus what is a good brake pedal for a 94 Ford Ranger. My Exocet, I have, I mean, extremely stiff brakes in that thing because there's no ABS. And the Yukon actually has pretty stiff brakes as well. And most of my other cars have had better, yeah, we'll call it better, brake pressure onto the pedal than the 94 Ford Ranger, but it's a 94 Ford Ranger. So we don't know. All right. As far as, oh, that fell. As far as things that you need to do under the hood, it's really just disconnect the battery, right? Disconnecting the battery is actually a critical part of removing the starter, or the transmission, because you have to remove the starter to get the transmission out. And starter's got that 12-volt hot on the back of it. So if you don't disconnect the battery, you're gonna make sparks, lots of sparks, and panic-inducing sparks. Hopefully you don't melt anything. So actually disconnect the battery before you mess around with the starter. All right. I guess we can actually move that out of the way. And the other shock's actually not under here, right? Is it sitting in gear? Oh no, there's one shock under here. And it's chocked up on it. Well, I guess a good test of the clutch will be whether or not we could drive over the chuck, right? Right? Let's see. Oh. All right, I did discover, man. Oh, I got a new crank handle. Woo! Now we can actually put the window up and down without the thing flying off. I did discover that man, it's a little toasty in here. That the boot, the rubber portion of this steel plate that actually covers the transmission opening, that boot was gone. It was just torn. And I'm gonna need a new one because the shift boot isn't supposed to be your environmental barrier between the inside of the car and the outside of the car. All right. Of course, we have different keys for the door lock and the ignition, and I can never remember which one is which. I think that the straight ones are for the ignition. They are. I should say relatively straight. Oh, brake pedal is way better. Oh, so is the clutch. It's actually stiff now. Let's see. Okay, it's running. Nah, brake pedal's still questionable. Oh man, the new shifter bushings are amazing. I can actually find gears now. Oh, and that clutch grabs low. Woo! Oh, yep, brakes are actually way better. It's just that first, oh my God, they're actually pretty tight. It's just that first inch of travel that has that, like, you know, that Ford softness, and then that bite. But man, that clutch, man, that thing must have been really rough before and I didn't realize it. Because, wow, I can barely get it up. Nope. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's amazing. Oh, we still got no power steering. I forgot about the power steering leak. Well, sometimes it just be like that. So no power steering, which is a little bit rough. But man, that clutch grab's good. Tempted Just spin it down the street a little bit. Yeah. Maybe at least up and down the driveway. All right. Got the suction cup mount. Okay, so we got the okay, so we got the suction cup mount. Man, I'm pretty sure this thing is still skipping on one cylinder. It's just got that early 90s misfire wobble. Smells a teeny bit rich. We still have a check engine light on, so maybe we'll investigate that when we get back. But the brakes are, you know what? It might still have a vacuum leak, and that would definitely account for the shit that we're dealing with right now. But man, this clutch is nice. Steering is a bit vague, at least in reverse, which is kind of what happens when you have a piece of shit 1994 Ford Ranger. Let's see if we can all right, we'll just pop down to the intersection. Ooh, we got a nice tranny whine too. Straight cut gears. Might need to check the fluid level in the transmission. Actually drives pretty good though. Man, definitely gonna need power steering. 1000% gonna need power steering. That is rough. And that tranny is whining. We're doing 1800 RPM. Yeah, we're gonna check the fluid level. Oh, the clutch is so nice though. Track straight, so did something right. It's not a terrible ride either, and this is not exactly a smooth road. We like to spend all our money on schools here, not our infrastructure. Whoa, she's slow. One turn signal works. Oh man. For as poorly as it goes, it goes. And man, is that exciting. This has felt like the project that has never ended. It creaks, bangs, and bumps and all that. We might have cleaned it out a little bit because it's idling way smoother now. Let's see if we can get it drop down. Check engine light, ABS light are still on. It's idling smooth, but it's idling a little bit high. So I'm guessing we've got a vacuum leak somewhere, which wouldn't really surprise me based on, you know, just the age and condition of the hoses themselves. I also have no fuel cap on the fuel filler. I don't know how sensitive this is to that, but some cars definitely will exhibit that. Will exhibit signs of a vacuum leak with that going on. All right. Where do we go from here? All right, this is another never-ending episode, but have a couple more minutes, and decided to do a little bit of diag. So I pulled the codes. I don't remember if I actually covered this or not, but to pull the codes with this, you get these two harnesses right here. You've got a single wire, and you've got I mean, it's a 5-wire, but it's a 6-wire connector that live inside this little clip on the side of this box here that just always seems to fall out. So you basically run a jumper from this, which is this right here, which is pin 2, to this guy. You turn the key on, you count the flashy lights, and you go from there. So I got 2 codes again. One was for the engine coolant temp sensor, but it wasn't engine coolant temp sensor low this time. It was high or shorted to voltage. And the other one was for power at pin 10 on the PCM, which just means that the AC button was hit, which it was. So that's doing its job. Pull the engine coolant temp sensor. Nice part about these connectors is that the bullet style connectors that are in here, I have some narrow guys on my multimeter. So I'm not damaging anything, but if you do not have thin probes on your multimeter, you definitely don't want to front probe a connector. So the way that the system works is when you turn the key to on, the PCM ECM sends out a reference signal to the engine coolant temp sensor. The engine coolant temp sensor basically just has the resistor in it that as it heats up, it changes the amount of current that it lets through, and the ECM says, hey, okay, here are my set points, right? So the low range for this is 3 volts, and 3 volts is 40 degrees F. Pretty sure it's 40 degrees F. And then at, I think if I remember correctly, at 1.5 volts, it's at 100 degrees, and then at 0.5 volts, it's 0.5 to 0.1, or to 0.5 to 1 volt. It is at 190 degrees or operating temp, right? So what we have is 4.62 volts, which means that our reference wire is either shorted to the ground, or it's either shorted to ground or it's shorted to another wire in the harness. So we're gonna, I mean, it's a pretty short run, right? This guy goes right underneath the intake manifold and then into this main harness right here. So there's not a lot of real estate to look for. I honestly might just find out which pin it is and run a new wire, because it's probably gonna be easier than busting out the entire loom. And at the end of the day, this is a free Ford Ranger. So I'll update you guys when I find out where that short is, or ultimately what I do with it.